everybody.
Good morning.
For those of you who don't know me, I am Jalen Redburn. I'm the youth minister here. It says in the bulletin this week that I'm preaching, so we got it right for 1 week. But this week is my last week of preaching. I've been preaching throughout this past month over the book, or the section in Hebrews 11 of the Hall of Faith, and looking at the many characters. And today is our last sermon on this, and today we're going to be focusing on the faith of Rahab. Rahab's mentioned in Hebrews 11 in verse 31. And she only has one verse, but she is an interesting story. But before we get to that, I thought, since it's my last time, one of the things that I enjoyed doing was, would you rather?
Nope.
Apparently not. Apparently I won't look at the slides for that. Yeah, would you rather have no slides or slides for the sermon today? There's your choice. Alright, well I have it on my paper here, so I can just read it out. So would you rather stay in a COVID-like quarantine where you see no one, or go to every party or event you're invited, and if anyone wants to come over, you have to allow it? So either you're home alone and you don't socialize with anyone, or you're socializing every minute of every day. Would you rather go back to COVID quarantine?
Over the next one.
Yeah. Or be extremely social and go to every party? Yeah, I wish we could do middle of the line, but...
Extreme.
Yeah. No. It's kind of hard to choose between those two. Okay, another one. This one's a bit different. You have to go back to high school. In order to get out of high school, though, you have to ace the test on one subject that you're choosing. Which test are you going to choose to try to get back out of high school?
Math. Reset.
We said high school, not elementary. I wish I had got recess back in high school. All right. Would you try the math test? And okay, we got a few people good at math. The science? What about history? Got a few history buffs. Or English? English, okay. All right. And then I have one more, and I have to make a slight adjustment because I mistyped here. Would you rather lie to the police to save an innocent man's life, or not lie and the innocent man gets taken away and sentenced to death? So it's not quite what's written up there. I mistyped. So either you lie to the police and you save the man's life, or you let the man go away, but you didn't have to lie.
But how would it be a lie if it was an innocent man?
The police are looking for this man, and you lie to the police that he's there.
That he's there or not there?
That he's at your house.
You give him an alibi.
If he's got a death sentence coming,
Okay. Would you lie to the police to save the innocent man's life? Or would you let the innocent man go to jail and possibly go to death? Plead the fifth, yeah. It's a hard decision, and it's kind of the decision that we saw Rahab faced with in the story today. If you'd like to follow along, we're going to be mainly in Joshua chapter 2. And this is the story of Rahab. Rahab was a prostitute in Jericho. It's an unlikely hero of faith, but it's one of the few who are mentioned in Hebrews 11. And it's because of what she does in this chapter. So in Joshua chapter 2, Joshua, the son of Nun, sent 2 men to spy secretly, saying, go to view the land, especially Jericho. So they go to Jericho, they come to the house of Rahab the harlot, and they stay with her. It was told to the king of Jericho, saying, behold, men from the sons of Israel have come here tonight to search out the land. And the king of Jericho sent word to Rahab, saying, bring out the men who have come to you, who have entered your house, for they have come to search out all the land. But the woman had taken the two men and hidden them. And here we see the moment where Rahab is faced with this choice. She has these spies from Israel coming here to check out the city of Jericho. How can the Israelites take over Jericho whenever they need to in the upcoming chapters? And Rahab has hidden them in her house. But the police of Jericho, they don't like there being the spies there, and they want to have them dealt with. So Rahab has to make this decision. Does she lie to these men? Lie and tell them, no, they're not here, I sent them away. Or does she tell them the truth and allow the spies to go to jail? Possibly even executed. It's a hard choice. And we can read what Rahab decided in the next verses. And she said, yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they were from. It came about when it was time to shut the gate at dark that the man went out. I do not know where the men went. Pursue them quickly, for you or overtake them. But she had brought the men up to her roof and hidden them in the stalks of flax when she laid in order of the roof. So the men, they pursued the spies on the road of Jordan to the fords. And as soon as those who were pursuing them had gone out, they shut the gate. So Rahab lies to the men of Jericho, lies and tells them, no, I sent them away. I saw them for a little bit, but they went that way. But aren't we as Christians told not to lie? You know, you could argue it's one of the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Lying is definitely something that is 9 times out of 10 viewed as wrong. But here we see this woman that's described as a hero of the faith lying to save the lives of the men, to save the lives of the spies. How do we deal with this as Christians? How do we deal with this fact that this hero of the faith, this woman who is part of the genealogy of Jesus, lies in order to save these men? Well, I would argue that whenever we look at the Bible, there are times where, while yes, lying is bad, if there is solid, good reasoning behind it, then God's willing to allow it, to maybe look the other way and realize sometimes good comes out of bad. And you know, we can look even in Exodus. Exodus chapter 1, Pharaoh has told all the Hebrew women, if you give birth to a boy, it's to be thrown into the river. It's to be executed. But we see at the end of Exodus 1, we see the women who help to give birth to these Hebrew boys lying to Pharaoh and saving the lives of these Hebrew men, of these Hebrew boys. Do you think God's okay with that? Well, if you look at the scripture, God looks upon those women favorably because they were saving the lives of these children. Or, what about, let's move away, not lying. What about murder? Thou shalt not murder. That's another commandment. But if you look throughout the Bible, the Israelites, not a couple chapters later, murder the entire city of Jericho. But we're told it's not okay to murder. I think it's important for us to realize that while we have these commandments, there are times where it's okay for things to work out in a different way. It's okay for us to maybe lie if it is to serve a greater purpose. To save a life, I think, is a biblical reasoning to lie. Now, by no means am I going to tell you, okay, go out this week and lie to everyone that you see, because, God says it's okay to lie. No, it's not okay to lie. It's not something you should be doing every day, but there are times in our life where we are faced with tough decisions. And I believe that we serve a gracious God, a loving God, who recognizes that we make the best decisions we can. And as long as we try to make the best decision, I don't think He's going to hold it against us if we tell a lie to save a life. We can look at this historically speaking and look at the Underground Railroad. In 1810 to 1850, the Underground Railroad exists and helped to guide 100,000 enslaved people to freedom. Thousands upon thousands of slaves were able to escape from torture in the South because of the Underground Railroad. And I'm willing to bet there were many Christians who served as these conductors of sorts in the Underground Railroad. And there may have been times where these Christians would be questioned by the police. Hey, do you have any slaves hidden down in your cellar? And if they say that they did, then the slaves were taken away, sent back to be tortured, whipped, and mistreated by their slave owners in the South. And again, these people, these conductors in the Underground Railroad, they were faced with a choice, just like Rahab. Do I tell the truth and condemn these men and women, condemn these slaves, or do I tell a lie to save their life? To save them from a life of torture and slavery and mistreatment. And now, again, these are all choices that people probably faced, especially with the Underground Railroad, where it's tough decisions, tough choices. And you can lie on either side of the argument. You can say, you know what? God told me it's wrong to lie. It's one of the 10 Commandments. You can never lie. And you know what? If you believe that, I understand. But I would argue to you, and I want you to realize at least that there are times where I think God's a gracious God, and He is willing to recognize that we can be put in tough situations. Sometimes in life, we have faced with impossible choices, impossible decisions to make. And when we are faced with these decisions, it is important to choose God in the best way that we can. Choose God in those decisions. Whenever you don't know whether or not I should condemn this person to slavery, whether I should condemn this person to death, choose God in however way you see fit. When faced with these decisions, choose God as best as you can. Moving on from the lying. We move on and we have to ask the question, why did Rahab even lie in the first place? I mean, at this point in her life, she isn't a Jew. She doesn't worship the one true God at this point. She's just a prostitute. And yet she lies to these men to save the spies. Why? And we kind of get an explanation of Rahab's motivations in Joshua 2:8-14. Now before they lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to the men, I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that the terror of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land have melted away before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, And what you did to the two kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. And when we heard it, our hearts melted. And no courage remains in any man any longer because of you. For the Lord your God, He is God in heaven above and on earth beneath. Now therefore, please swear to me by the Lord, since I have dealt kindly with you, that you also will deal kindly with my father's household. And give me a pledge of truth, and spare my father and my mother and my brothers and my sisters, and all who belong to them, and deliver our lives from death. So the men said to her, our life for yours, if you do not tell this business of ours. And it shall come about when the Lord gives us the land that we will deal kindly and faithfully with you. And so in this section, we see two possible reasons why Rahab lied for the Israelites here. Number one, first option, she was fearful of the Lord. She has heard all of these stories about what the Lord has done for the Israelite nation. He's brought the Israelites out of Egypt, out of their slavery, and dried up the Red Sea so they could walk through land. He's done all of these miraculous wonders, and he has destroyed people. He has destroyed nations for the Israelite men. And that can be a scary thing. And so, you know what? Rahab was possibly fearful of the Lord. And that's why she chose to lie for the spies. But I think there's a different decision that she made here. I think that if we read here, we see that Rahab, while she may be fearful of the Lord, she's also impressed with the strength of the Lord. She's heard these stories and she's amazed at how strong the Lord is, to the point where she wants to be with the Lord. She wants to be with Israel and follow the Lord. And you know, we see her almost give a mini confession of faith before confessions of faith are even a thing. She tells the spies that their Lord, their God, is God on heaven and on earth beneath, proclaiming his power, proclaiming the glory of the Lord. Rahab is deciding here that she wants to side with the Lord. She wants to be on the side of the Lord, even if she may not have been the most godly woman in her life. She gives a confession of her faith, and because of that confession, her and her family are spared. We read later on, as the story ends, that Rahab sends away the spies, and she covers for them, and they're able to get back to Joshua, and they tell Joshua that the land is theirs for the taking. And as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, in Joshua 6, Joshua and the Israelites come back to town, come back to Jericho, walk around the city 7 times, and take the land of Jericho for their own. And whenever they take the city for their own, there's only a few number of people that they save. They save Rahab and her family. And not only do they save them from death, they don't execute them or murder them or do anything. But Rahab and her family go on to live with the Israelites for the rest of their life. Rahab and her family become a part of Israel. They follow the Lord. Even though Rahab was a prostitute before this, she turns a 180 and goes from not knowing the Lord at all, having no relationship with God, to being a part of Israel and following the Lord. And one of the things that I get out of this story that I always find most interesting is at this point when Rahab makes these decisions, she has no relationship with God. She's heard, by all means, about God's great power. She's heard the stories of the Lord, but she doesn't have a relationship with God. You know, the past couple of months, the past weeks, we've been looking over all these heroes of the faith. And if you look at each and every one of those heroes, there's one thing in common. They heard directly from God. You look at Abraham, and he was told by God, go and sacrifice your son. Moses was told through the burning bush, go and save Egypt. Joshua was given the instructions from the Lord to walk around Jericho. And Samson, he was giving instructions of how to live his life through an angel meeting his mother before Samson was even born. All of these men and women of the Hall of Faith that we have talked about so far, they got to meet with God. They had this relationship with God where they spoke with God one-on-one. But Rahab didn't have that relationship with God. But even though she didn't have that one-on-one relationship with God, she still had heard of his power. And because she knew of the power of the Lord, she decided to trust in him. Even when you may not have the best relationship with God, we can trust in him. Rahab makes this big decision to lie for the Israelite spies when she's at a point where she has no relationship with God. But she still trusts that if she stood up for the spies, that the Lord might deal kindly with her. Even when you have not the greatest relationship, we can trust in God. And you know, looking back on all of the different heroes that we've looked at over the past month, I think the major point that we need to get is no matter where you are in your walk with Christ, trust God. Because each and every one of these men and women that we talked about this month, they all represent a point in your walk with Christ almost. You know, we start with Rahab. She's a woman who has not been at faith with God. She has no faith necessarily. She has no relationship. She didn't know how to follow God. But she chose to serve God. She chose to do what she could and live for God with her life, even at the very beginning of her faith. And you know, maybe you're like Samson. Maybe you look at yourself and you know you mess up a lot. Continually, time after time, you know what you're supposed to be doing, but you continue to sin against God. And I'd argue that because of Samson, we know that even if you sin against God, even if you're continuing to fail God, God still wants you to serve him. Or maybe you're like Joshua. Maybe you have been a follower of God for a while, for a long time. But you're now becoming a leader. And you don't know how to lead. You don't know how to lead whenever you've just grown up and you've been the follower. And so you might be like Joshua, where you have to turn to God for judgment, for guidance on how to lead at this time. Or maybe you're like Moses. Maybe you have run away from your faith. Maybe you ran away because you didn't feel like you were good enough. And even though you ran away from your faith, God is still standing and he's wanting to welcome you home. And he's wanting to welcome you into faith and welcome you as a part of the family. And he's not only willing to welcome you, he's willing to use you if you just come back. Or maybe you're just like Abraham. Maybe you have been a follower of Christ for all of your life. You've been following God for a long time. And you know that God's going to ask a lot of you. So you have to follow God, even whenever it seems like He's asking for too much. We've talked about a lot of men and women this month. And the bottom line of all of this, the bottom line of each and every one of these stories is to follow God, to trust God, and have faith in Him. No matter at what point in your life you are at, have faith in God, and He can use you to do great things. It may be as simple as just standing up for someone. It may be as simple as giving some money. It may be as simple as filling a shoebox. But God has a plan for each and every one of us. No matter what point in your life you're at what point you're at right now in your walk of faith, I challenge you to trust God, to have faith in God, and to live for God. Dear God, thank you for this day. Thank you so much for this time you've given us here to learn more about you. To try to draw closer to you, God. And God, I know each and every one of us, we're at different places in our walk. But God, I pray you help us to draw closer to you and to be willing to serve you. God, I pray for us this week. I pray you help us to serve you with our life. It's in your son's name we pray. Amen.